So we talked about sort of, let's go back to workforce, because I think that that's been a theme that has been discussed. And, Missy, I know you're here from CWD. They're doing some great work with great workforce, but I want to get your thoughts as leaders. We talked about, we have an aging workforce. Baby boomers are going to be retiring. We might not have the same amount of people being able to fill that job. So you kind of approached, Joe, you talked about AI and how that's going to help us. But what strategies are you all thinking about, both in your companies and on boards, to really talk about how are we preparing for the transition for both craft and professional? How are we ensuring that that institutional knowledge is still there with people that have been in the industry for 30 plus years? And, what are you thinking? What some sort of strategies are you using? Deanna, I'll start with you, and then Joe and Dennis.
I'm going to give a plug for the panel that's in a little while where we're going to talk specifically about workforce. But at least where I'm looking at it towards the end of my career is exposing young people to the opportunities. I was supposed to become a teacher or a lawyer because my parents were teachers. And so they thought, okay, that's what you go and do. And I think that's what's happened in our communities. You're either, and it used to be that it was a bad thing to make money. Remember that part, right? You were supposed to, as a Latina, who got an education, you were supposed to go back to your community and do things. And I was in that world too and started an advocacy. But workforce is making sure that people realize that they can find jobs in this. And I've had 5 careers at this company. So from what we're doing is a lot of intrusive development and succession planning. And I'm going to go straight to that because the workforce we'll get to, and we're going to talk about community colleges, we're going to talk about what companies do to find craft people and making sure they're aware of that and working with universities. But the fact is that unless you have people that look like this in the seats that we sit in, I don't know that there's another way to get more diversity and more diversity of thinking. And diversity is not a bad word. Age matters too. But that you have an opportunity to get that leadership exposed to the worlds that our communities serve. If you're looking at the numbers that Nelson, you've described, what better way to serve a community than to look like the community you serve and speak some of the cultural issues. But so that's a big way of talking or of answering it's a broader way of answering a question that I know we'll address further.
Yeah, I actually want to start off with a point that Deanna made, just by being a case study myself. There's no doubt I'm not on this stage in my job if this guy isn't on the board of Exelon. Doesn't mean I didn't deserve the job. Doesn't mean I wasn't smart and good at what I did. I was. But the fact of the matter is, until somebody highlights you, you don't have a shot. And he did. And so he's still claiming some additional royalty payments. But for right now, he's going to have to live with my undying gratitude. And that'll have to be enough for a while anyway. There's a dinner in there for you. But
let me tell you, I saw the star. He was available. He was one of the top lawyers in my community. He won a case in the Supreme Court that we had lost in the appellate court, and he got a unanimous verdict out of that court. I knew he was a star. The problem was that nobody else in the company, because he was all in Philadelphia and everything is done in Chicago. So not having the connection with regard to that. Now, he's paid me 100 times because the stock started at $28 and it's now was $3.40 when I sold. So you talk about a real benefit. He did give me a royalty, but he is the most, but as a Latino, nobody realized that Fortune 100 says that he is one of the most respected CEOs in the country in the energy field. So it ain't me saying it. It is the people outside saying it, that this Latino is better than most of the other guys that are working in this industry.
Thank you. I didn't mean to start that, but I'm glad I did. But no. Listen, but I think sometimes people hear, for example, Nelson talk about corporate directors. And you may be at a stage in your career where either that's unrealistic or just it's not there for you yet because you're not old enough and don't have that. But if we don't feed that part of the pipeline, and this is, I think, what Deanna is really saying is, unless we get people making these decisions that are sensitive to the value we could bring, then we're not going to end up where we want to. But look, as to your question, a couple different things. I think the way we're training people now is going to be very different. I think young people are learning with AI tools, in particular in the nuclear industry. That's a great device to start simplifying training. Here's how you change this valve. Here's the video of it. Here's the instructional stuff. We're doing that kind of across the board. We're hitting everything that Deanna is talking. We all are. The problem is we've got to do it at an order of magnitude greater than what we're doing in order to get the talent in. And even with the efficiencies that AI is going to allow us to do more with fewer people, we're not going to, that is the huge issue. And again, I don't want to front run that panel because I think in many respects it's the most important discussion we're going to have. But how do we get more people that are trained? One final thought is, and I'm sure you see this in your company, Maria, how you moved up in a utility and energy company in the past was like just logging the hours, right? And the successor was known 5 years before she or he got the job because that's the way the pipeline worked, and we just needed more of the same. I just want to hit this. Unconventional approaches to solving problems also means unconventional candidates for jobs that historically were satisfied by one skill set. Now that skill set has to evolve if we're going to keep pace.
Yeah,
I think it
absolutely.
changes everything.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing I'd add there is the four of us are up here, the five of us are up here because somebody took a risk on us. We probably didn't have the perfect credentials, the perfect experience, but we showed different attributes and we'd had different experiences and we delivered different results. And I think as all of you, regardless of what level you're at, I think we, from a human capital standpoint, we need to be better risk managers, not risk avoiders. It's really easy to say, Jose's not ready. He hasn't worked in the industry for 30 years. But what is it that I see in Jose that gives me confidence that he'll be successful? And I know what, as I've looked at promoting people and now that I sit on boards, I think about, one of the most important jobs is picking the next CEO. There's probably 4 or 5 qualities that I look at in people. One is, do they have what I call agile conviction? The conviction part is, they've got the drive, they know where they're going and everything, but especially in these turbulent times, you've also got to be flexible. So how do you manage the risks of the current volatility in the economy, in geopolitics, in your own company's culture, and how do you match that with conviction? The other thing that I look for is intellectual curiosity, not just the what, but the how and the why, because that's something that people replicate time and time again. The higher you get up in the organization, what you find is people don't bring you the easy problems. They bring you problems that don't necessarily have a right answer. All of the answers or the solutions have risks. So how intellectually curious is the person to be able to handle those difficult problems? The other thing that's really important to me is, in Mexican Spanish is, tienes ganas. Do you have desire? Because these jobs, you're on 24/7. You're sacrificing a lot, and it's worth it. But you better have the drive, and because not only are you going to be really happy when your stock price goes up, you're not going to be real happy when you get a call from a governor or from a senator or a local city councilman saying that you screwed up a project and now it's costing me money, or you find out that you're not hiring enough people from a certain group and stuff. So you better be self-aware and have the ganas to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, I love that. I do also think that the industry itself, I love the fact that people can move up sort of within the industry, but yet, I mean, I think really focusing also of hiring from outside and bringing that new perspective, it's really important. And it's something that, we need to kind of think through, like, what are the skills that we need as an industry to make sure that we are able to change rapidly, right?